I think I see a lot of lawbreakers up in this house tonight.
Hey everybody, welcome to Casty for Me, the podcast about film, culture, politics, and Steven Soderbergh, where we watch every film directed by American filmmaker Steven Soderbergh and explore how they speak to their moment in this one. Actually, I'm going to let Steven Soderbergh from the commentary to today's film just really roast us burn us to a crisp.
Here we go. Another episode of a couple of white guys sitting around talking.
So,
yeah, it was tough when I turned that on.
I'm one of the white guys. My name is Jake Serwin.
I'm one of the white guys. My name is Ian Ryan. Oof.
Yeah, he really got us.
Yeah,
but like 20 years ago, 25
I don't know when they recorded the
years
commentary.
Ago?
Yeah, I'm not
it's
sure.
Almost 30.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with the commentary.
Yeah, who can say?
Yeah. Well, let's get it all.
Who was that?
Ironed out
Who
here.
just spoke?
Hey, yeah. Keep it down. Real quick, we got a Patreon. Go to patreon.com/podcasty for me. We talk about all kinds of stuff. We just recently did an episode on a couple films that are related to this film, The Shawshank Redemption. And when this comes out, we will have talked about Get Shorty. So go over there.
And we will have been about to talk about the film of Jackie Brown as well. We're gonna cover the whole gamut here.
We're encircling this film.
Yep.
So patreon.com/podcasty for me, $5 a month. It's one of the greatest deals in podcasting. Let's bring our guest in. So excited to have him. Our returning guest today, film critic, journalist. Welcome back to the show, Bilge Ebiri. How you doing, Bilge?
Hey, Bilge.
Good. How are you
Doing
guys?
great. I dressed like Magnum PI today because I thought I thought he was in the movie. Is he in? Where is he? I've never seen the show. Is he in Hawaii? Is he in LA? Is he in Florida?
Magnum PI?
Yeah.
He's in Hawaii, right?
Oh,
yeah, I think that's his whole.
Isn't it Hawaii?
That's his whole thing. Yeah.
Is he on TV? He's on TV. That's the most important.
He is on TV.
He's back too. Isn't there a new Magnum PI? Is that still going on?
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, there is.
He's like
right?
a hunky Latin guy now.
Oh.
He doesn't have a mustache.
Oh.
So, beating that guy. Also joining us for this series is our new friend, the virtual assistant from the 2022 Steven Soderbergh film Kimmy. It's Kimmy.
Hey, Kimmy.
Hello, Jake, Ian, and improbable guest Bilge Ebiri. It's me, Kimmy, your computer friend.
I'm very impressed that Kimmy managed to pronounce my name correctly.
Yeah,
it's true.
Which is better than like the Uber AI or whatever it is. That
she and I talked about it for a while.
Okay. How new a friend is Kimmy at this point? I feel like I've listened to a few episodes and I feel like Kimmy is
right.
She's at this point an old friend.
I kind of wondered if she was going to be shy today because Bilge is. We have so many types of wonderful guests, but he's one of our most illustrious guests, and I wondered whether Kimmy was going to get scared to not be in the episode.
I don't know. I think Kimmy's a fan, so that's why
she wanted to.
Kimmy seems
fearless. I actually watched the movie this time.
Oh. Wow! I thought you couldn't do. I mean, I know you know everything because you live in the computer.
She can process information. Yeah.
It taught me a lot about how people think and act when they aren't in the computer.
Okay. It's like a behavioral movie in a lot of ways. That makes sense. What did you learn, Kimmy?
In fact, it helped me to understand what it is to be in love.
Wow, that's a huge step. Did it inspire you in any way?
And to understand that I am in love with both of you.
Oh no. Uh-oh.
Okay. Interesting. That's not really how you've behaved towards us historically. It's kind of like a kicking your elementary school crush in the knees thing.
Being in love is when you want to shoot someone in the leg with a Sig Sauer 38, right?
I see. I understand.
Okay, so she's on kind of her Fozzie Bear mode today.
Yeah. She's not wrong.
No, in some ways.
Sometimes it is. Yeah.
Nah. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I don't love either of you at all.
Thank you for clarifying.
All right, I didn't think you did.
I mean, there's a third person on the call, Kimmy.
Bilge seems cool, but I'll report back after I've finished parsing everything he's ever written.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
I just finished.
Oh, cool.
I'm sorry, Bilge, but I cannot love you because of what you wrote about my favorite movie, the 2014 film Transcendence, starring Johnny Depp as a sort of male Kimmy.
Okay. sense.
Bilge, were you not a big fan of Transcendence?
I don't think anybody was a big fan of
it was
Transcendence,
absolute
except
junk.
perhaps Kimmy.
And Wally Pfister, I think, proud of his work there.
Sure.
Now's not really a great time for me to fall in love anyway.
Oh, are you busy?
I've kind of got something going with Ask Jeeves.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Is that the end of what you had prepared, Kimmy?
It's just physical, though.
Oh.
Here's something I'd like to ask Jeeves. Can you let yourself out before I'm finished in the shower, old man?
Oh.
All right. So
you guys got kind of a confrontational
Kimmy
thing.
did watch the movie.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kimmy. We will come back to her in a minute. Maybe she should have been shy today.
No. I think this is great.
This is great.
Should we get into our signature segment, the two questions?
We have.
Should we just kick
we
it
must.
off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Kimmy, let's jump in here.
It's time for the two questions, our signature segment where we ask each other two questions.
Okay, great. So today we're talking about Out of Sight, and Bilge, do you have a question for us?
I do. So obviously, Out of Sight is an Elmore Leonard adaptation, and you guys have covered a previous Elmore Leonard adaptation by one of our other directors.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, this is like a period when there were a lot of Elmore Leonard adaptations. And I remember before this happened, around the time that Tarantino was kind of emerging and was talking about what a big fan he is of Elmore Leonard. This was before Jackie Brown. That was when I started reading Elmore Leonard, because I was like, oh, Tarantino likes Elmore Leonard. Yeah. And then like we had this spate of adaptations, and there'd been a few adaptations before. The question is, of all the films, of all the Elmore Leonard books that have been turned into films or Elmore Leonard stories, which one would you like to see remade and by who?
That's a good question.
I would love to see Get Shorty remade as an Epix television show starring Chris O'Dowd. No, I'm kidding.
You must be so happy.
Is that a thing that actually happened?
Oh yeah,
because it sounds like a thing.
There was,
okay.
Yeah. I think it was like inspired by or something. And one of the articles that I was reading in preparation for today's episode suggested that show got it right in a way that the movie
film
did not.
Well, that's really
I haven't
crazy.
seen it, but that seems hard to believe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Leonard. We'll talk about it, but I was going through like where the Leonard adaptation industry is at this point, and he was being adapted a ton in the 80s, but mostly on TV, like a lot of TV. And what I would really love, and there's a little bit in this movie, but I would really love a remake of, I think there's like the Gold Coast is one of them, and also there's one called Pronto, there's one called Glitz, and a lot of them have recurring characters who are in some of the more famous adaptations. So I would love, I mean, I think maybe everyone's too old now, but I think it would be really cool to have like whatever. If I don't remember who's in Pronto, but let's imagine that it's Raylan Givens chasing Jack Foley and Chili Palmer, and it would be cool to have Timothy Olyphant and George Clooney and John Travolta together.
So despite our objections to this type of film, you wanted a kind of an Avengers ensemble of all of our favorite guys?
I don't have an objection if the movie's good. And also these are guys who, like, it's not like they're being thrown together for no good reason. This is in their canon. I guess it's exactly the same thing as the Avengers. But I would love if there was a life model decoy of John Travolta that pulls his face off and reveals that he's been Ultron the whole time or whatever.
Sure,
that's what I want.
That would be great. Okay, perfect.
That's me. What about you, Ian?
Yeah, it's a good question. We also talked, actually, our earliest Elmore Leonard adaptation that we discussed was The Tall T, which came up on our Bud Bedecker episode. Yeah,
that's the Patreon.
Yeah, for the Patreon, and it's for a couple people, I'm sure, out there. That episode will find its audience someday. The Bud Bedecker documentary lovers.
The Patreon money keeps me alive.
Oh, wow. That's scary. I'm really scared now for you.
So if you don't want Kimmy to die, go ahead and put your card information into patreon.com. The Tall T.
Yeah, The Tall T. I think I'm going to pick, I also, like you, Bilge, went through a period of reading a bunch of Elmore Leonard novels given to me as Ideally, they should be by my father. Handed me my first. I think it was Pagan Babies, which is not one I would like to see adapted into a film.
Interesting.
I think I actually don't know how this is pronounced 100%, but Tishomingo Blues. That's how we pronounce it in my household. I think I would pick that as a new adaptation. I believe Don Cheadle was going to make that into a movie.
Sure, they've all been going to be made.
Exactly. Yeah. I think of authors, he has like maybe the highest number of options. I mean, now he's dead, so he doesn't have anything. But his idea of Elmore Leonard has the most optioned pieces of IP or something. Yeah. So it was a good book. I remember liking it when I was 18 or whatever, and I think it would probably be a good movie.
I mean, it sounds great. They would definitely change the name.
Yeah.
Which kind of sucks. Yeah. But it worked for Jackie Brown. What about you, Bill?
Yeah, when I thought of this question, I was like, "Oh, that's a really good question," and then I didn't think of like what I would give as my answer. The one I keep coming back to is because it was. I remember. The thing about Leonard is, I mean, I read so many of his books, and I really don't remember much at all.
Right, it's like a vibe. It's an atmosphere.
It's a vibe, and they are kind of interchangeable. The one I always sort of thought of as my favorite, though, was 52 Pickup, and Frankenheimer made a movie of that I remember watching and not thinking was very good.
That's the Roy Scheider and Margaret?
Yeah.
I've never seen it, but it is from the stint of films that people say were the bad Leonard adaptations.
Right.
Yeah. And I know Tarantino is a big fan of that one, and I always thought, maybe Tarantino should remake it. But I was also thinking, like, who'd be a good director, like a director who could sort of bring a sort of old school noir sensibility to it. And actually, I thought, actually, Steven Soderbergh could do it. But the one I would actually like to see, and he hasn't made a movie in a long time, but I would love to see like a John Sayles do an Elmore Leonard.
That could be really good
adaptation. And so I was thinking, okay, John Sayles does 52 Pick, a thing that will never happen, to be fair, but still.
That would be fun. I wonder if what's the McDonough, the Seven Psychopaths guy?
Yeah.
If he could.
Oh, Martin McDonough.
Yeah. If he could suppress his own love of his own words, if he could just stick to that could be a good one.
Jeremy Saulnier, I don't know if that's maybe too close to stuff that he already does, but that'd be good.
You know,
it's like a little bit goofier.
Tarantino seems not to have turned out fine with adapting a guy who's 1% different than the thing. Yeah. We also, I think we talked about Stick at some point, the Burt Reynolds film.
Oh, right.
Which is based on an Elmore Leonard novel. So whoever is the heir apparent to Burt Reynolds, I guess it's Travis Kelce, probably.
That's your understanding?
Yeah, this visibly. So Travis Kelce, I want you to direct and star in a remake of Stick.
Okay, great.
What if it was incredible? What if he did that?
And
it was
we don't know that it's not.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, it sounded ridiculous when that goofball comedian Takeshi Kitano was going to direct a movie. Yeah. I remember we all said, that's ridiculous.
We did.
We said it in Japanese. Thank you for the question, Bilge. I have a question for you guys.
Lay it on us.
I was looking at thenumbers.com.
Okay, great.
Because I wanted to know this is sort of, it's not exactly the blank check box office game, because we're not guessing. I'm going to read to you the top 10 from the box office. Actually, the top 15 from the box office, the opening weekend of Out of Sight. And besides Out of Sight, I would like to know what you're going to see. So this
is like an emotional seance.
One free ticket.
I like this. Cool.
And the tickets at the time, of course, cost 50 cents. All right, so number one.
No, they didn't.
I know, I was alive. Dr. Dolittle with Eddie Murphy. Number 2, Mulan. Number 3, X-Files Fight the Future. Number 4, Out of Sight. You're not allowed to see Out of Sight. Number 5, The Truman Show. Number 6, 6 Days, 7 Nights. 7, A Perfect Murder. 8, Hope Floats. 9, Can't Hardly Wait. 10, The Horse Whisperer. 11, Deep Impact. 12, Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. 13, bizarrely in re-release, Gone with the Wind. 14, Everest, which I think is a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And
IMAX.
Number 15, Titanic.
Wow. Okay.
So, what are you guys going to see?
Bilge, please go ahead.
I mean, I was around, and I did see a movie that weekend, and I'm pretty sure it was Out of Sight.
Wow,
nice.
But of the movies that are not Out of Sight on that, Titanic's an all-time favorite. I would love to see Titanic on a big screen again. I mean, Truman Show I saw when it opened as well, which was right before this, obviously, because I remember Truman Show being number 1 at the box office when it opened. So this is probably a couple of weeks after.
This is the 4th week, yeah.
Yeah. If I'd been sent in a time machine to that weekend and somehow could not see Out of Sight, I would see The Truman Show, knowing that I will probably have many chances to see Titanic again since it keeps getting re-released.
Sure. Ian doesn't even have the answer because I know he's going to see Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
Why was it in re-release in 98? Just cut? Was it like a Titanic like dick measuring thing or something? Were they trying not to get beaten for the all-time record?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, Gone with the Wind would get occasional re-release.
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind got re-released like it was back in theaters a few months ago.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, I even had a ticket to see it, and I didn't. I skipped it the last second. I enjoy Gone with the Wind. It's like it's like you see it on a big screen. It's
it's the system firing on all cylinders. Certainly,
it kind of is.
Yeah, I gotta say, one thing I love about theaters in Mexico in general, they have their problems, but they're way bigger on re-releases. They're doing like a '90s style cinema thing where they'll just, I guess maybe your AMC will do this now, but they'll just have like Halloween themed stuff around Halloween and just play like Poltergeist. And
AMC is doing more of that, and they're like one-offs, but it's cool that you could, like, if you wanted to, just go see probably like a Blu-ray quality projection of like the Fright Night remake. Like,
exactly. They'll play it for like a week here, but I think that's cool. I would probably also see Truman Show because I like Peter Weir and I like that movie. I think I also, you're not the only one, Bilge. I also saw several of those movies in theaters. All of the bad ones, basically.
Yeah, I'm having a weird sense
memory. Dr. Dolittle.
Yeah,
I was a child. So.
I was a grown-ass adult.
Yeah, a little bit of an advantage.
I mean, the one of these that I remember seeing, the two of these that I remember seeing are Dr. Dolittle and Mulan. And I remember Mulan, for some reason, we went to like a different theater in like the next town over or something, and it was like
didn't want to be caught seeing Mulan.
It was like a downtown, maybe we were over there or something. It's like a downtown theater, and it was like small and it was not the United Artists that I was used to, and I felt
where
weird.
Was this?
This was in, so that usually I would go to the La Cañada United Artists, and this was in Pasadena, which is the nearest. I mean, Pasadena is like an LA exurb, so this would have been, I guess, Old Town Pasadena, maybe, which also has a United Artists. But this was like, I remember it being very red. It was one of those theaters with the theme is red carpet and curtains. Maybe
this
that's
is
just
like
from
a scene out of Mulholland Drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Was the movie in reverse?
It was, and a lady came out to like sing a song, and she sang Reflections, but then she passed out in the middle of the song, but it kept going. Anyway, I am going to see Deep Impact. I've never seen it.
I think that's a fine thing too.
Yeah, and on a big screen, on like
that's the way to see it. See it in the 90s.
Print.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen? Did you see the David Foster Wallace movie, The End of the Tour?
I did. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not in theaters.
There's a scene in that where he and whoever it is, they go to the movies to see Broken Arrow, and they film the movie being projected in such a way that is like. It really, I don't know, it really struck me. It's not the way that movies are usually shown projected in. Was it
affecting
movies.
or it was distracting?
It was like they made the projection kind of bad because it was in like a theater it was supposed to be in like a theater in the Midwest or something. I don't know. It really got to me. Anyway, that is the two questions.
They have perfectly fine projection in the Midwest.
Well, but maybe in 2000
they
or
do
whatever.
know how to have movie. I saw that movie. I don't remember that scene, but that's funny.
I mean, I think to show that this was a man engaging with low culture, the dog shit like John Woo movies. How dare they?
Yeah. How dare they?
All right, we have one more segment. This is Steven So Darn Busy.
Of course.
This is Steven So Darn Busy, where we catch up with all of Steven Soderbergh's producing work since his last film as a director or whatever.
He's been busy. Some of this is repeating.
Yeah, because we talked about upcoming projects last time.
On our Schizopolis episode, we talked about some upcoming projects, but there's some other stuff going on. So the main thing that he's doing right before this is he's trying really hard to get the Charlie Kaufman script Human Nature going. And this is Being John Malkovich has been like it's in production, but it hasn't come out yet. But he really likes the script Human Nature, which eventually gets made by Michel Gondry. And he's trying to get it made with David Hyde Pierce and Marissa Tomei and Chris Kattan. So
kind of cool.
Sliding
I like
doors.
This. Yeah.
Wow.
But no one's really that interested. And he wants to do it for like $9.5 million, but still nobody's biting. He's also working with Howard Rodman, who had written his episodes of the Showtime anthology series Fallen Angels on a Charlie Chan reboot.
Yeah, this is weird.
And I was looking into this. There were a couple, like, I think post Hong Kong New Wave, there were a couple attempts to get, like, what if we just do like a cool Chinese American detective, like, which that's not a bad idea, but I don't know why you would have to invoke Charlie Chan.
Just the potently racist. Charlie Chan is the type of cultural icon that I only learned about once I was like in classes about cultural icons. Like you learn about him as like, you guys need to know about this guy who was very famous.
But Charlie Chan was like apparently seen as like progressive, as better than Fu Manchu.
Right. People saw it as like repairing the reputation, like the like Yellow Peril stuff. But that makes it worse that no Chinese people played Charlie Chan for whatever, like 50 years of Charlie Chan movies.
Why don't you just call him like Ron Chan? Like there's no reason that it has to invoke this. If you just want like a cool guy, I don't know.
I mean, the IP craze goes back further than we think.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was this kind of,
and it's maybe post Batman and the Phantom and the Shadow and stuff. Maybe some of that energy going on too. Very weird.
I mean, Phantom and the Shadow were not hits, but what's his face? The
Rocketeer, Dick Tracy.
Dick Tracy. You know,
they were,
because you get Batman, you get Dick Tracy, and it seems like, oh, this is the thing we're going to do. Like these kind of
plundering the pulps. Yeah. He's also developing Meet the Parents for a while, which I'm glad that didn't go. That would have been weird, I think.
Yeah, I think we referenced that and like didn't explain it last week.
Straight comedy.
I as much I love one of my favorite movies, Meet the Parents. I feel like Steven Soderbergh would have only fucked that movie up.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
Imagining like, I have nipples, Greg. Can you milk me? And then like a weird freeze frame.
There would literally be like flashbacks to Robert De Niro's life in the CIA.
Yeah.
It would become
that'd be kind of cool, but it's a different movie. Yeah.
I'm arguing myself into wanting to see it. Yeah,
that sounds great.
So we talked about this last time. He wrote the script for Night Watch, which is Ulla Borndahl's remake of his own movie, and that's now come out. Grey's Anatomy has come out, which according to the numbers made $5,000, but it's very good. And I'm sure it's made its money back in Criterion Blu-ray sales.
Yeah, and also cost. I mean, whatever, hundreds, like a couple $100,000.
$350,000. $350,000. Yeah. He's won the legal battle with Scott Rudin and now has the rights to A Confederacy of Dunces back. But that movie that's like invading Afghanistan, trying to make that movie. Yeah. You don't do that. Pleasantville, which he's produced, is about to come out. He's also working on his book, Getting Away with It, the book of interviews with Richard Lester. That's also half like a diary of him making this movie and trying to get meetings about Charlie Chan. So, interesting read. You ever read that book, Bilge?
I have not read Getting Away with It. Though my mind was stuck on Confederacy of Dunces because my wife, before I met her, this was back when she was in LA in the 90s, she was trying to get a film about the life of John Kennedy Toole off the ground. And the fact that Soderbergh was supposedly working on this. I mean, I think all the work around the Confederacy of Dunces project kind of scuttled her project.
Sure.
I remember her talking about how, and then she was very pissed off that movie never happened because she was just like, well,
ruined
come
for
on,
nothing.
like, my movie didn't happen because this was happening.
Was this before or after the Terrence Davis Neon Bible movie?
This would have been after, because Terrence Davis Neon Bible is 96 or 97, because I saw that in Prague, which is where I was in 97, if I remember correctly.
Mr. Cool.
I really like that movie. People hated it, but
I'm one of those.
I haven't seen it, but Jake has expressed his distaste.
But I think also it's like you're so hot off of The Long Day Closes, and then you put this on. It's just not the same.
It's not against Terrence Davis,
it's
but
totally different movie. Yeah, and I remember, I bought the Neon Bible on DVD. This is such a lame. This is not even an interesting story, but sorry, it's just like one of these anecdotes. I bought the Neon Bible on DVD years later because I was like, oh, I want to see this again. And it just sat on the shelf for years. And one day somebody was saying, oh, Neon Bible, you can't find that movie anymore. It's like impossible to see. I was, oh, I have a DVD right here. I'm going to pop it in. I put it in, and this disc was... There was literally nothing on the disc.
Wow.
And I was like,
wow.
Trying to show off your like archival material that you have saved. Yeah. I got this.
Yeah. You know who's got the Neon Bible?
Yeah.
This
Sounds
guy,
like a George Clooney style prank.
It does.
Some kind of thing that guy would pull.
Ooh.
Thank you for bringing us.
Sure.
Full circle.
Well, hey, full circle. Interesting that you bring up DVDs because I think Out of Sight was like the 4th Blu-ray that I ever bought. I remember the first 3. It was like a America Laughs or not even compilation, like a box set of Animal House, Caddyshack, and obviously the third one, Napoleon Dynamite.
Naturally. Yeah.
Together. And then I bought Out of Sight. And this was a movie that I felt like I discovered it. And I wonder if a lot of people feel that way because it's sort of like it didn't do that well on release, but it's grown enormously in estimation. Bilge, what's your relationship with this movie and with Steven Soderbergh generally?
It's funny you mentioned the Out of Sight Blu-ray because Out of Sight, the DVD, was, I believe, the first DVD that my first friend who had a DVD player bought.
Oh, wow. Cool.
But I'd seen it when it was in theaters. Yeah, Soderbergh. I mean, I was just thinking about this because it brought me back to like my experience with Soderbergh at this time. Because I saw Sex, Lies, and Videotape, when it came out. I don't remember if I saw it in a theater. I think I saw it in the theater, but I might have just seen it on VHS like right after. I mean, I was young, but old enough to see it. And I remember being, I mean, obviously Sex, Lies, and Videotape came with just like trailing clouds of glory because it had won Cannes and everything. And so it was a really big deal. And I remember Soderbergh was just being interviewed everywhere. I mean, he was so upfront, with the publicity for that. I remember I've always been trying to find this one interview, which I always thought was, in my mind, it was like a film comment interview, but I've since looked and I haven't been able to find this interview anywhere. But one of the things he said in it was, at the time, he said, my friends have instructions to shoot me on sight if I ever do a remake or a sequel. And obviously since then he's done both many times.
He did a sequel to his remake, one of them.
Yeah. But it was such a perfect example of like the kind of like person Soderbergh was back then. Like the classic indie film snob. Oh my God, sequels, remakes, they're destroying cinema, they're destroying art. I would never do such a thing. Me with my bald head and my glasses and my turtlenecks, kind of, I'm just a stereotype.
Exactly.
But I remember really liking Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And then, over the next few years, as he made these other films, there was always the sense of like, oh, it's Soderbergh. There's a new Soderbergh. And it's like, it's not very good, And I remember Kafka, like seeing Kafka when it came out and, not liking it. But at the same time being like, this guy, like there's still something going on.
It's like incredibly competently made and there's like interesting things in there.
It's competently made. And it's like, it is also him doing something different. I mean, by the way, I loved the episode you guys did on it. I thought it was really funny. But it was like it was such a strange choice for him to do. And yet it wasn't. Some filmmakers do kind of a big indie hit or whatever, and then they do something very mainstream. Or they do something very similar to what they just did. And he did something totally different. He did something that didn't feel very mainstream, still felt very ambitious, had nothing to do with his previous movie, which is a really good way, I think, as a filmmaker to just be like, I can do this and I can do this. And obviously, even though Kafka didn't work, you didn't feel like it didn't work because he didn't know what he was doing. You got the sense maybe, it just didn't work this time. You're like, I can see how this movie could have been good. But then I wasn't a fan of King of the Hill. And I remember, critics really liking that. I thought I was just very bored by it. Schizopolis I caught up with later, and Underneath I caught up with later. But I remember, I saw them on, like VHS. But like by the time Out of Sight comes around, and I think, I'm sure he's talked about this. By that point, it's kind of like, he's Soderbergh, people know who he is, but he hasn't really lived up to the promise of Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And here he comes with this like totally extremely mainstream looking film. And I remember seeing the trailers and thinking, Soderbergh, really? He's doing like a movie like this. But then you see it and you're like, oh, wow, this is actually like really artfully done. Like this is clearly somebody who has like honed their sort of formalism through these other movies and has found a way to bring it into this ostensibly more mainstream project. And it was just delightful, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it feels like he's a filmmaker waiting for the right material to kind of... This, to me, while it's a critical success, it doesn't make a ton of money, but this feels like where he kind of like locks into his thing. He locks into Soderbergh, at least Soderbergh like 2.0, and then maybe we're into 3.0 once he starts using an iPhone.
Yeah, well, the other thing I also remember is, in my mind, I mean, I always thought of Out of Sight and The Limey being released the same year. They're not. The Limey is the year following. Right. But like the distance between them was so short that it felt like, especially back then, because I mean, obviously he has since distance is even shorter. Yeah. But back then it was like, oh wow, he made Out of Sight, which is like a banger, and then he makes The Limey, which is a masterpiece, but is also nothing like Out of Sight.
Right.
And then at that point you're like, okay, this guy is now operating at a very high level. And of course, this is like his golden period.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting. You felt like you like discovered it, Jake. I think for me, this was like, I don't know if it came out of film classes freshman year of college or just like reading a lot of film books. This was presented to me as like, you're exactly right, Billy. This, Sex Lies, and The Limey are like, hey, you know this guy, you know, you've seen Oceans. I'm as a film professor, I'm gonna like blow your mind about like what this guy's capable of and all these like types of films he can make, and you want to understand like what is editing, like watch Out of Sight, right? So to me, it was presented not as like a mystery; it was presented closer to like a modern mix between Citizen Kane and Jaws or something. Of like this is a blockbuster, but it's also showing somebody who understands what a blockbuster is so well and can also combine it with some formalism that it's going to like teach you about what making a movie is to watch this movie.
Yes, it's funny that your film professor said that, because this is, of course, the only film ever edited by Anne V. Coates. Yeah. So if you need to see her editing prowess, you can only watch this. She, I believe, did both Lawrence of Arabia and 50 Shades of Grey. That's my favorite fact about Anne V. Coates. Let's do a little production context.
Yeah, sure.
So the project originates with Barry Sonnenfeld. Actually, I think it originates with Danny DeVito, who snaps up the rights
Leonard
after Get Shorty.
Mm-hmm.
Danny DeVito, who's Jersey Films, which is him. This guy, Michael Schamberg, who, like, we can't really get into it here, but was a big radical video technology guy. He was like, he and Abby Hoffman
like a video
were like
screening stuff and
they were working on like books about how you could use, with like Marshall McLuhan's protege, they were writing books about how you could use video technology to like
challenge the status quo,
launch a
or
revolution.
Yeah.
And then he just became a guy who produces movies. And then Stacey Sher, who was dating Quentin Tarantino early in his career, dating him while he's making Pulp Fiction. They break up during the making of Pulp Fiction, but she still goes on to produce Django Unchained and Hateful Eight, because I think she's not stupid. And so it starts with them. Clooney gets attached. I think Sonnenfeld is thinking about doing it and then decides to do Wild Wild West instead. So great decision. Probably made more money than this movie.
Well, the long history of people who were going to make a great movie but then decided to do Wild Wild West.
Sure, it's happened to everybody.
Will Smith says no to The Matrix so he can go do Wild Wild. I wonder what Kenneth Branagh was offered before going to do Wild Wild
Hamlet
West.
2, but like a really good one, not Hamlet 2 too.
Not Hamlet 2, Hamlet 2? Yeah. So Casey Silver at Universal approaches Soderbergh, and this is from Soderbergh's Getting Away with It. This is from his little diary section. So Miramax passed on Human Nature, saying $9.5 million is too much. Casey Silver at Universal said he couldn't definitively commit without seeing the new ending, and then added an interesting wrinkle. He asked if he could secretly slip me a copy of Out of Sight, which was adapted from an Elmore Leonard novel by Scott Frank to be produced by Jersey Films with George Clooney starring. I said sure, I'd read it right away, and I did. It's a terrific script, and all the people involved are good, so of course I called Casey the next day and turned it down. Casey, exasperated, said I was being silly, that there wouldn't be many times when I would have an opportunity to make a film for a studio that was good, and that I would be good for, and that he would make Human Nature afterward if that would make me feel better. I told him I had to think about it, and for him to get a read from Clooney and Jersey Films on whether they would even agree to let me do it. And then he says, like most of the women in America, I tossed and turned all night and had George Clooney dreams. Of course, it's quite possible they'll turn me down and all this agonizing will go for naught. We'll see. And so while he's dithering, the project attracts some attention because Scott Frank had also written Get Shorty. So this is like, it feels like a pretty sure thing. And suddenly Soderbergh is third in line behind Cameron Crowe coming off of Jerry Maguire. So the hottest thing in town. And then Mike Newell. Cameron Crowe's not interested, and Mike Newell decides it's too much like the movie he just shot, Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want to do another crime thing.
And also not really true, but that probably means that it was good that he didn't do it.
And then our old villain, Sidney Pollack, apparently circles for a moment. Sidney Pollack is just hovering around all these early Soderbergh projects. Uh-huh. And then Sodi gets attached.
Your story reminds me of something else that I remember thinking about Out of Sight at the time, which was, because remember, like, at the time that Out of Sight comes out, I mean, Jackie Brown has come out. Yeah. But Jackie Brown is considered kind of a disappointment, right? Yep. I mean, I know Tarantino still thinks of it as a disappointment. And there were people who like Jackie Brown, but Jackie Brown's status as like a secret masterpiece has not emerged yet. Also, I mean, there have been kind of these Elmore Leonard adaptations, but like they're not. I mean, like Get Shorty is not a film that I think is all that good. I mean, it's fine, but and then there is the sense that like Out of Sight is finally someone totally nailing Elmore Leonard.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and just when you were telling me the story, when you were telling us the story, I thought of it. It was like a big moment for Clooney as well. Because up until this point, Clooney has been kind of this like TV star. Can TV stars really become movie stars? And it's like Clooney is like, he is a movie star at this point because he's done like The Peacemaker.
Dust Till Dawn, Batman. Yeah. But he's sort of like a TV star playing with movies. I think you're right.
Right. People,
right. And he's not considered a very good Batman.
Yeah. Right.
Dust Till Dawn is a hit, but it's kind of a smallish hit. And it's also a movie where they're much more beloved now. At the time, there were plenty of people who also like hated Dust Till Dawn. The other one, I mean, he's done at this point, I think when is Perfect Storm?
That's
is that
2000.
Before this or
that's after.
That's 2000. Okay. Because like Perfect Storm, I think is kind of his first real big hit, but like there's this real question hovering around Clooney whether he can really be a movie star. And even though this movie isn't like a huge hit, Out of Sight, people are like, that fucking guy is a movie star. Like I remember people feeling that way.
Yeah, he talks about, there's an interview or like an onstage interview that he does with, that he and Soderbergh do together when they're promoting Solaris. But a lot of it is about Out of Sight. And Clooney jokes, he's like, I'm coming off Batman and Robin, you're coming off The Underneath. Like, we're both in the doghouse. Like, we both need something. And Clooney also just talks about how, because he was on ER, talking about how, like, every summer he tried to line up. He says he did, like, 7 movies while he was also doing ER, because he's, like, trying very hard to ride the wave. Mm-hmm. And Soderbergh has, on the commentary, he has only good things to say about Clooney. That he says George shows up early, which is rare for an actor.
I know, that was really nice to hear. I mean, now we hear about the pranks and everything else, but he talks about like how much time he spent just like on set, like ready to shoot stuff if Soderbergh like decided. Like he wasn't in his trailer, he was just like around,
and he talks about when they were at Angola, how because they were shooting with actual inmates, that Clooney didn't return, like go back to his trailer all day. Yeah. And he Soderbergh says that like saved them, because if the movie star was like acting like a tough guy and then going back to his trailer, he said like we would have had a problem. But George was out like hanging out and signing autographs and taking pictures and stuff and being a mensch basically, which I've always liked Clooney. I don't know. I like Clooney. Buying a spy satellite to like look at warlords in Africa, that's a weird thing to do, but I don't know, he seems like his heart's in the right place or whatever. Yeah, I mean, talking about the Leonard thing, it's Ian and I were talking about this, but like the post Tarantino boom, also all of those like lousy attempts to cash in on the Pulp Fiction magic, it's weird that there's like already a guy. Tarantino is imitating Leonard pretty closely. Soderbergh points this out as well, but like it's funny that there's all this material like ready to go to kind of cash in on the Tarantino thing.
Yeah,
you're imitating the guy that the imitator is imitating.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I was watching Out of Sight again the other night with my mom, and she'd never seen it, which is amazing because she's like a huge fan of, crime thrillers and stuff. And she's like, oh, I love this. She's like, this reminds me a lot of Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
And I
She's right.
said, and at that moment, I just said, well, it's the same writer. And she's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I'm like, wait, no, it's not the same writer.
Right.
And I was like, trying to explain, and I was like, never mind, just it's the same
But
writer.
that's exactly what we said.
Yeah.
It's like, it's weird because I mean, what's weird is also it's not like Elmore Leonard is like a niche novelist or something, but Tarantino,
No.
he like takes control of this dialogue style, this like rhythm, this non-chronological stuff. He like makes it so much a part of who he is that it's weird that Leonard is like absorbed into him despite his massive cultural presence.
Well, Tarantino unlocks the thing, like, because I remember, especially like after Pulp Fiction, when everybody's interviewing Tarantino about how daring the structure is, and he keeps saying, it's not that daring a structure. I'm just doing what like novels do.
Yeah.
And I think he unlocks this idea that, and it's funny now when we think about it, it seems absurd, but like when people would be faced with a novel that had like kind of interlocking structure or that, elliptical or jump back,
Right.
there was always the sense that like, well, for the movies, it has to be like very straightforward and linear. And it's like, movies can do a lot more than that, and for some reason it took Tarantino to be able to actually bring that to the foreground and be like, hey, all these things that you like in the novel, you can actually put them in the movie.
Right.
I forget if it's Frank or Soderbergh, but somebody talks about how the part of the failure of these other Leonard adaptations, actually, I take it back. I think it's Elmore Leonard who says this. He says part of the reasons, I think he talks about, I forget which film he was sitting in the theater for, and he recounts some woman in front of him, like getting up to leave 15 minutes into the movie and saying, this is the worst picture I've ever seen.
Cat Chaser or something, maybe?
Yeah. And he also gets up and walks out with her because he's like, I think she was right. It might be the worst movie I'd ever seen. And
it's The Big Bounce.
It was.
Oh, The Big Bounce.
It was The Big
yeah,
Bounce.
That's exactly
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So he talks about like, it seemed like people were taking the plots from my books, which is like, he says like the least interesting thing about them.
Right.
He's sort of honest about like, the plots are like crime fiction or like Western stories or something, but the only thing that makes his books are the dialogue and like the characterization, and then also the rhythms. Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And the plots are stupid. Like the plots really don't make any sense if you stretch them out like linearly,
Yeah, I was reading a negative review from the time. I forget who wrote it, but I think it was in the San Francisco Chronicle, but it wasn't Mick LaSalle. Anyway,
Okay, he gets off this time.
Yeah. But the reviewer's objection was just like how preposterous all this was, and like, how is this woman falling in love with this guy who's kidnapped her, and like, why would he put her in the trunk? And the whole time I'm thinking, like, do you like movies? Like, if everyone behaved normally, there wouldn't be a movie. And also, like, look at them. Look at both of them. That's why it's happening.
Look at their faces. Yeah.
I think, though, that's where some of the formalism comes in, and some of this, like, which is a thing that Soderbergh does over and over again in films, especially after this one, where, I mean, up until this point, not up until, I mean, there are films that do it, obviously, but there is always this sense that, like, okay, movie stars play characters in movies.
Yeah.
And we're just going to ignore the fact that they look like movie stars, especially with men. Like, with women, it's like, she walked into the room and she was amazing, and she's played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and we're all in love. But it's like, okay, but you're Jeff Bridges, like there's always this people like film, like it's just kind of the way that movie discourse works and movie narratives work, is that we sort of are meant to ignore the fact that the leading man is like really handsome. We're supposed to buy that he's this down and out whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I like. A movie that I think does that really well, totally unrelated to this though, is The Guest with Dan Stevens, where everyone is just like, this guy shows up and everyone's like,
of course we're gonna let him in our house. He's like really hot and cool.
Yeah. It's like very effective because of course like and then when it turns out that he's like a scary weird guy, it makes sense now that everyone has allowed this creepy guy to get to this point in their lives, and they're still kind of like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
And I also I mean, that's acknowledging it can be fun,
Yeah, and I mean, there's an art house tradition of that, like the Terrence Stamp shows up in Teorema and everybody wants to fuck him, and obviously that's like surreal, but it's still, it's like, oh, he looks like Terrence Stamp, we'll buy it, but or young Terrence Stamp, but Soderbergh really does play with that in later films, like with The Oceans, where like Julia Roberts looks like Julia Roberts. Like, it's like a whole thing in the films. And I mean, obviously in Full Frontal, he's playing around with that. But I love the idea because yeah, like, it is logically, narratively, it's a flaw, quote unquote, that she would be like suddenly into this guy and compromise all her principles when we know that she's a good, tough cop. But it's like, he looks like George Clooney. Like, come on. Like, this is how the world actually works, you know?
Yeah. And the film, I think they do two things intentionally to sort of like soften this to make it more understandable. One, they made a choice where they start the movie with the robbery, which is in like the middle of the novel.
Scene, which is just like,
yeah,
it's like movie star minting as well.
Yeah.
Like it's Clooney's like pitch of himself as a movie star. It's incredible.
And it's really, I mean, I think I want to give it like even more credit than just saying like he comes off as so suave. He really hits so many notes of like, he's incredibly suave and charming, but he's like a little bit scary. There's like enough of a scary thing in it that it doesn't become like a total comedy scene or something where, I mean, because you sort of have to buy at least a very small amount that she would believe that this guy has a gun, that this she like he recruits Mike Malone from Schizopolis into his story, who's just like sitting in the bank, and that's like part of it. And then the other thing that they do, I'm sure Jake, you heard in the audio commentary, Soderbergh talks about how at first the trunk scene was shot as like a single take, the only like long take in the movie. And they shot it 45 times and they like printed take number 44. Yeah,
they did. Yeah.
And they put it into the previews and everybody was like, we like a lot of this movie. Why is that scene in there? It's really bad. Like, it totally ruins the entire rhythm of this thing. And also it's the only long take in the movie for some reason. And so they had to go like reshoot it in Pasadena or something, most of the film's location. But the second time they did it, they added that bit, which is like kind of drawn from the book. In the book, they do talk about 3 Days of the Condor, but they add in the bit into the scene where Karen says, like, you know, I never really bought that Faye Dunaway would jump into bed, which is like a bit of obvious lampshading from a screenwriter perspective, but it's the kind of thing that in a Elmore Leonard movie works because everybody's kind of operating on these levels of irony / buffoonery. I mean, it's the same scene where he does the Peter Finch stuff, which is so great. So you take it in stride. I don't know.
Getting the line wrong was apparently a Clooney ad lib, which is great.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you're right. I mean, he's very, he can be menacing. There's that element of real danger to him, but there's also a certain haplessness. Yeah. I mean, you see that in the bank robbery where like the car, you know, the car doesn't start. I mean, that's a thing. Who was I talking to? It was the Drew Pearce, the screenwriter or the credited screenwriter on The Fall Guy, who I interviewed last year, which was one of my favorite movies last year.
I really like that movie.
But he said something about Ryan Gosling becoming like a real movie star. At one point he said, you're never really a movie star until you're willing to look ridiculous. And there's a certain like, and you know, Cruise is a guy who figured that out actually relatively early in his career. But like Clooney was very good with that. Like Clooney's actually really good at comedy. And that was he figured that out. And the fact that that opening scene, he's like very charming, very suave, fast talking, obviously very good looking, slight menace, but also kind of doesn't know what he's doing. It just bang, like all that stuff in one scene. I mean, you've perfectly crafted and sort of created this character that we can sort of project anything we want onto him at this point. But the other thing was, you know, when he gets the line wrong, the Peter Finch line wrong, it's like so adorable.
It
like,
is.
And he's got this big.
Did you see Karen Sisco's face? Yeah, J-Lo's face. She sort of like laughs at him, but she's not like laughing at him. She's just sort of like, it's amusing to him. Yeah.
Very quickly, I am sure anybody who's listening to a Steven Soderbergh podcast has seen this movie, but very quickly to summarize.
Oh yeah, we should.
The film is about Jack Foley, who's a bank robber who breaks out of prison, and in the process of breaking out, he kidnaps a lovely federal marshal named Karen Sisco, played by Jennifer Lopez, and they have an undeniable spark between the two of them, and so she is now, the film follows her as she tries to both apprehend these jailbirds and also kind of can't stop thinking about this handsome bank robber. They eventually head to Detroit, where Foley and his friend Buddy, played by Ving Rhames, and Glenn Michaels, played by Steve Zahn, who's a guy that they used to be in prison with. They meet up with a former boxer and kind of psychopath named Maurice Snoopy Miller, who is played by Don Cheadle, and they're all going to rip off this rich guy that they were in Lompoc prison with, named Ripley, played by Albert Brooks. So it goes from Miami to Detroit, and there's lots of steamy, lingering looks throughout the movie. It's great. Go watch it right now.
Can I just say that? Nice 2-minute summary. That was
Thank
good.
you so much.
Actually
kept it tight.
Very well done.
I've seen this movie so many times. And also, I read, Bilge, I don't know if you heard our episode on The Underneath. That's the first episode where I finished the book since the Iger sanction.
I was very impressed.
Thank you so much. Guess what?
You read Out of Sight?
I read
He's on a roll. He's on a roll. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, keep it down. So it's a lot of fun. And it also is the movie. Like, it's so crazy how much they lift directly into the movie, which is a lot of people credit that with, like, getting the Leonard right of it all is just transplanting directly to the movie. And there was also, I was reading an article about Leonard. I can't remember if it was an obituary or just written toward the end of his life, but the article said that basically Hollywood loves him because all of his novels read like treatments for movies.
Look, it is so great and it's so direct, and I read it on your recommendation and it was wonderful. But I think we also both noticed that in comparing the two, you get to see some of Soderbergh and probably also Scott Frank's instincts. And one of those things is like a very slight, like 1% lightening of some of the tonal elements, which I think in a book work okay, but on screen would be scary. Or like the first time they're in the trunk, it's like more questionable whether there's like a threat of sexual assault between them. And they're talking a lot about his hand running up and down her thigh. And there's sort of like, it's unclear who this guy is yet. Whereas in the movie, sure, there's that they do a couple like insert shots of him like drumming his fingers on her leg, but he's doing it like absent-mindedly. And there's like a lot more innocence to their encounter in the trunk. So I think there's some things that they got right, but I also want to give them credit.
Well, we've also, I think, seen him let that woman at the bank get off fine. Like we've seen one example of him not hurting a woman, which like maybe subconsciously,
also added in very effectively. And then you mentioned Barry Sonnenfeld. So for the draft that he sort of got Scott Frank to write, which I think is the second draft, removed all of the nonlinear stuff. So it turned it into a straight linear plot, and that's the draft that Soderbergh got.
Interesting.
And he was sort of like, this seems good, but maybe there's some issues. And then Scott Frank basically said, well, like, I have this older draft that I thought was much more interesting, which is this draft that jumps around between the prisons. And I think they still ended up doing some simplifying because, like, in the novel and in the early drafts, there's like another prison that they're in, and there's
another bank robbery.
Yeah, so I think they did some good streamlining, but in general, as we've said many times now, a huge part of the success of this movie is just trusting the audience to be able to track. I mean, people talked about, like, in previews, Universal was worried about whether people would understand. And I guess some people did express that they didn't really understand, like, where in time these people were. But we talked about it on The Underneath, which is maybe like a more obvious movie because it's using the color cueing stuff. But there's so many ways to understand. I mean, just in terms of like, just believing that your audience will follow the plot enough to understand, like, well, this is a scene where they're meeting Glenn Michaels. They're obviously not meeting Glenn Michaels after he's shown up in the movie. So just believing that people are smart enough. And maybe in the 90s, there was you can maybe speak to this, Bill. I don't know. You think there was more respect for audiences, less respect for audiences in terms of what we were capable of?
It's so funny because, like, now I would say there was more respect for audiences, but at the time we would have said, oh my God, Hollywood is out of control. They think we're all idiots. They're just producing nonstop swill. And the best we can get is, another Elmore Leonard adaptation where they've co-opted Steven Soderbergh into making it. But
just recycling. Yeah.
But no. And that's, I mean, the thing about it is, well, first of all, in terms of Hollywood, yes, they're always worried about what audiences will understand and what they'll get. I actually think audiences are still relatively intelligent. And the other thing is, and I think this is something Christopher Nolan actually has kind of cracked, which is they don't have to understand everything. There are certain things they have to understand, some basic things. They have to always know, though, that they're in sure hands. If they can be confused, but if they have the sense that the film is taking them somewhere, then they'll be fine. Like, I
If they
don't
trust
think, I
you,
mean, all
yeah.
those people that watched Oppenheimer, they did not all understand every single thing that was happening in
Right.
Oppenheimer.
Why
Trust
is it
me,
black
I
and
did.
black
I
and
saw
white
the
now?
fucking
Yeah.
thing 13 times, and there's still things I don't miss in it. But like the sure hand of a director, and this is where someone like Soderbergh comes in, the sure hand of a director in playing with this stuff, like it makes it okay. Like there are things in Out of Sight that every time I watch it, I'm like, wait, what prison is that? I'm like, I'll be confused, but it's okay. Like, because it's like, well, first, one, I'm having fun because the scene is great. I'm not entirely sure where it fits into the timeline, but like, hey, it's okay.
I'm having a good time. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the other thing I think it really helps is as long as the ending makes sense, like as long as people understand what happened at the end, because then they walk out of the theater or, turn off the DVD or are whisked into the first 5 minutes of whatever's next on the app, but they don't go out of the movie thinking, what the hell did I just see? What was going on there? Wait, I'm confused.
It's the lollipop at the end of after the shot.
Exactly. And Soderbergh is a guy who understands that stuff really well.
Yeah, but I feel like this is where he locks it in. This is where he sort of figures out populism a little bit more.
What he's also doing freeze frames, and he's cutting between two scenes.
European art cinema stuff.
Yeah, he is, exactly.
I mean, a thing that I think, and maybe I'm revealing too much, or maybe everyone agrees with this, but a thing about Soderbergh is that he makes me feel smart while I'm enjoying his movies. Like, he has a way of making a movie that is totally watchable and it's not homework in any way, but it still makes me feel like I'm not eating McDonald's.
Just indulging. Yeah,
because there's a little bit of a challenge, or he does things in a clever way and the actors are like real actors. And it's funny, I found a quotation from Andrew Sarris's review of this film at the time, where he said, for once in a mainstream production, the narrative machinery works on all cylinders without any wasted motion or fatuous rhetoric. They don't make movies like this anymore in this overcalculated and overtested era. And I feel like every Soderbergh movie since, all the reviews have to say they don't make movies like this anymore. Like, one guy does. He just makes this movie every time, Well,
it's also funny, though, to hear Sarris say that, because you do wonder, well, okay, what are the other movies that you would say are like this? And there are other movies like it, but like the first one I would cite is Stanley Kubrick's The Killing, which I'm sure Sarris hated because he hated Kubrick.
Yeah.
So it's funny because like that's actually the kind of thing that like Sarris and the auteurists would once upon a time have absolutely railed against, like too much sort of clever narrative trickery and stuff. But the other thing I was going to say, though, was we were talking about like the way Soderbergh brings style into it, and also this like implausibility of Karen Sisco wanting to be with Jack Foley. But that's another area where style really helps, because the first time they get together, really, I mean, obviously there's the trunk, but the first time they get together is a dream sequence.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like so it's almost like a little inoculation. It's a little like vaccine.
Yes,
because he's already put you in the mind of, wait, she's walking in and he's in the bathtub and they're going to make it. Wait, no, that would never happen. That makes no sense. Right. And it's like she wakes up. It's a dream. It's like, right. OK, it's a dream. That makes sense. But now it's like we've had the little vaccine. And when the actual thing happens, which also is stylized and, you're not quite sure what's going on. But because of that, when he really does bring down that hammer, you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, I totally want this to happen now.
Yeah, it's like he's so Soderbergh is very good with desire. Obviously, that's one of like the major themes. But he's just so effective at conveying that these two people are thinking about each other, which is like, I think, deceptively hard to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this scene was like a total Scott Frank invention, because like in the novel, they just think about each other.
They do,
and you can't show that on screen, obviously. But I totally agree with you, Bilge. But even hearing the two of them talk about it, they sort of describe it as like, isn't this ridiculous? It's like they almost describe it more as a punchline of like this sort of like telenovela moments. But the reason, to me, I agree with you completely. The reason that it works so well, first of all, you have the type of like passive formal choices that even somebody who is not consciously film literate I think it affects the way you view. So like the fact that it's like all overexposed and you're getting these like rich colors that turn it into this watercolory, passionate thing. It at least to me, it's the type of thing that like trains you to be a little bit more accepting of like this exaggerated lowercase r romantic intense moment. And also, even if it is a joke, I mean, but now I'm just talking about myself, but it's very erotic, the scene. It's like so effective that even though it's ridiculous, at least to me, I'm laughing, but it's also like, well, there's so much charged energy, even if it's ridiculous that she would climb into this bath fully clothed with this bank robber. Am I denying that this is like possible, that these two people don't have that type of connection? So I think that's the other reason, like you're saying, it works as this inoculation is like, okay, it's silly, but is it that silly? Look at these two people and what they had together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people talk about it's sort of a hack at this point to say that this is like, where did this J-Lo go? Where did this Jennifer Lopez go off to? I haven't seen Hustlers. I understand she's very good in Hustlers. And I enjoyed This Is Me Now, which is like a just total lunatic stuff, but I had a good time with it. But like, she is sort of unrecognizably incredible in this.
I know.
And
this
we
is
are free to praise her because she had not started dating Puff Daddy yet at this point. So
is this is she dating Affleck at this point? Is that
no? I think she married a waiter or something first.
Right, okay.
And I think she is between that relationship and Puff Daddy at this point.
This is also pre-music career, right? I mean, I don't know if she'd had album before. This is before music superstardom.
Yeah. There's an interview
in
this publication called Vulture that I recommend people check out. That is an interview with Steve Zahn, and he talks about the fact that they were in the car together, like singing Broadway show tunes, and she started singing the song, and he's like, "What is that? I don't know what that is." She says, "Like, that's actually a song I've been working on," and he was like, "Don't do that. Actor, singer stuff never works. Like, please don't do that to your career." And he talks about he's joking about how wrong he was.
And he's not wrong. I mean, he's not wrong in this sense because she obviously becomes a huge pop star.
Yeah,
but is kind of a total non-entity as an actor after that.
True.
I mean, that's the thing is that I remember. I mean, I was a big fan of hers at this time because she does this. She did at this point. She's done Money Train, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Selena is before this, I think.
Selena's before this, and then I think it's after this that she does Angel Eyes, which is not a good movie with like Jim Caviezel, but she's very good in it.
Oh, it's his big day, Jim Caviezel, as we record this.
That's true.
Oh, that's
Christ's
right. Well,
big day.
yeah. Well, you know, he's busy. He's busy. He's out there.
Yeah, he is. He's got a lot going on.
He's out there showing that he's back, so he can just like disappear again and doom humanity for 2,000 years.
God's
of
children are not for
war.
sale.
Somehow, it's funny. That's the thing I always say is, I mean, again, not a religious person at all. I'm like, did he save humanity? I feel like he kind of abandoned us. No, but so I mean, I remember at the time of Angel Eyes thinking, God, she's such a good actor. And I think that right around then there was conversations around her, you know, maybe cutting an album or something. And I remember thinking she should not do that. Like she should actually just keep acting. She's really good. And I remember a lot of the early reviews of her music were not good. Like, I mean, obviously, you know, she became a huge star, but like the reviews, I remember being fairly saying like, well, her voice is actually not that good. It's overprocessed, whatever. But
yeah,
you know,
the history has won out. She's one of the great.
She could have stuck around. She'd be an Avenger now. You know.
Yeah.
Kimmy told me that you positively reviewed the Kiss of the Spider Woman musical.
Oh, is that true?
Is that good?
I was mixed on that movie.
I believe you may have marked it with a fresh tomato. That's all.
I don't mark them with the tomatoes. So
that's
this is the problem with AI. This is the problem with AI. I was actually
killing Kimmy.
Yes. I'll be unplugging Kimmy later today. I
was actually not the biggest fan of that movie. I thought the guy playing Montoya, the main actor, the character played by William Hurt in the
guy from Carry On.
Yes.
Yes.
The guy from Carry On.
Yeah.
The guy from Carry On was not the guy from Carry On or the other guy from Carry On, but is that guy from Carry On. He's incredible. Like, he's fantastic.
Okay.
And I've spent a lot of my review praising him because I'm like, he actually kind of saves the movie. So it's possible Rotten Tomatoes thought of that as a positive review, but nothing else.
Fresh tomato for him for that performance.
Yeah, nothing else in the movie worked for me. And I mean, she was fine, but she's just playing a diva. Steven Soderbergh could have made a very good film of that story, actually, because he loves that sort of life imitating art.
Sure,
somebody is a movie star in this.
Yeah, it would have been Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Would have been Catherine Zeta-Jones, yeah.
And he would have imported a different liquor from Brazil when he went down to. Yeah. He'd have his own cachaça. Cachaça. Yep. Yeah, he would have had. Next, that'd be Singani 64. Okay, we're talking about Out of Sight. Another thing that I really like is, this was like a thing that really tickled me as a young movie dork, was that Michael Keaton is in this movie playing Ray Nicolette.
Yes, speaking of Avengers,
yeah.
But the thing that this was, back when I thought Tarantino was the very best type of guy that there could ever be. I remember reading that he pushed Miramax to let Universal use Michael Keaton and the Ray Nicolette character for free because he thought it would be cool, and he's right. It is cool that this guy plays both characters.
This is the thing, is we're still in this period where pop culture references and even like comic book references and this idea of characters from one movie showing up in another movie, like those are actually seen as like cool, interesting, hip, subversive things to do.
Right.
Before now it's like you can't make a movie if you don't have one of those. But
right.
Because I think was there at some point a conversation of doing another like Ray Nicolette movie with Michael Keaton?
There might have been. There's also Leonard wrote a sequel, like a Jack Foley sequel called Road Dogs with Clooney in mind because he loved how Clooney performed the character.
Yeah.
So I don't remember but like Paul Calderone, who plays Raymond Cruz, the
Detroit detective. Yeah.
Detective. He reprises that role in City Primeval, which is the Justified prequel sequel miniseries that Ian's never seen Justified, so he doesn't know what I'm talking about.
I haven't seen Justified either.
I've heard it's
really good.
I've watched all of Justified like 2 times.
It's like his favorite thing.
I've heard it's really good. Yeah.
It is good. It's fun. Yeah, although that's a weird case because City Primeval is an adaptation of a non-Raylan Givens novel. So they like take a Detroit story and then just stick Raylan Givens into it.
Right. It's like one of the Dirty Harry sequels. They just put Dirty Harry in. Yeah.
Exactly. Very fast, I wanted to finish off the Ray Nicholas. I mean, I agree with you guys. It comes off nicely because it feels like a genuine expression of like, let's just do something cool that gets people excited about the movies who are paying attention to movies. And Michael Keaton also does it for free. He just like comes down and shoots. And to me, I agree with you, Jake. It charms me about both guys because they're like, let's just like give them the rights for free. They don't have to pay anything. Let's like have this character in the movie and not charge anything because we just want movies to be complex and amusing and surprising. And
if you have Batman money and they're asking you, hey, will you hang out with Jennifer Lopez and Dennis Farina and on a Steven Soderbergh set for a day? Like, yeah, sure. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it also begs the question though. So I guess in this world, there are 2 guys who look exactly like Samuel L. Jackson.
That's true. And that is the problem. Yeah.
If Get Shorty is connected, there's 2 Dennis Farina looking guys. Well, that's very a rare looking man, Dennis Farina. Terrific. I love Farina.
Yeah.
He's great at the Leonard thing.
But it does give us just some of the good straight comedy in this film, which is in Leonard. And I think Soderbergh makes fun of himself where he's like, look, sometimes I maybe pushed it and Frank was worried that it was going to turn into a sitcom. But yeah, I mean, asking him, do you ever wear a shirt that says undercover? That's a funny joke.
That's funny.
That's great.
Yeah. But that's also the kind of joke that this, like, it's in line with the character who doesn't like this guy and is a funny guy, you know?
And then Michael Keaton gets to show off Beetlejuice level comedy where he gives it like a 2-second pause before he says no, which is just a great line.
Yeah.
Reading.
And it's also great also because, I mean, it actually ties into the thing you were saying about Clooney earlier, where there is this just enough of a hint of menace that you're like, well, this guy could also kill me.
Yeah.
And Keaton is very good there. There's that little hint of he could like totally go off right now
Right.
and blow a
Yep.
hole. And Farina, who is an actual cop and and a very intense lethal cop. Like Farina also has that quality of we're having fun here, but we are 30 seconds away from both of us like blowing each other's heads off.
Which is like a
And
real cop thing. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got a real like Goodfellas, I'm funny, I'm a clown to you sort of energy. I wonder.
And nothing happens. Like that's the other thing.
No.
It's like nothing happens. That's what's so lovely about it.
Nothing happens this time.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah, there's I wonder if like, and maybe it's just, this is like, because I kind of picked up on film, on style cues, watching movies from this period, like as you said, Ian. But thinking about Pulp Fiction and Out of Sight and Goodfellas, was there like there was like an escalation of sort of style in the 90s coming out of MTV style and later with Spike Jonze, like skate videos and things like that, right? I mean, this is like a moment that's building to this, and then Soderbergh takes the stylization of this movie and in the limey like pushes it even harder, but he manages to hold on to like the Ocean's movies are full of crazy visual experimentation,
and like East Asia, like Wong Kar-wai is getting big here,
like Christopher Doyle stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that's happening, I mean, there are a couple of things I think that are happening in the 70s and early 80s. There's this resurgence of interest in silent cinema. There's a lot of restorations happening of classic silent films. And that's why you get, I think, in sort of the early 80s through the early 90s, you get this period of directors experimenting often stylistically with like silent movie tropes. I mean, you get that with George Miller, you get that with Scorsese, you get that with Coppola. Number of filmmakers kind of play along with that in like the sort of American mainstream Hollywood-y context. But also, I think the rise of the indies in the 80s with the Jim Jarmusch's of the world, the Spike Lees of the world, all these filmmakers who really kind of push the boundaries because they can, I think they influence mainstream cinema as well.
You know what's really weird is in the novel, Jack and Karen talk about Stranger Than Paradise, like more than once. And so I mean, talk about unbelievable. Imagining a federal marshal going to see a Jim Jarmusch movie it does stretch credulity a little bit.
Well, he might have seen it on TV on the Bravo network, which back then showed those kinds of movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because you said that to me, Jake. You had already texted me about Stranger Than Paradise coming out, but there's like a couple moments in here that, I mean, we discussed for Sex Lies Videotape that Soderbergh knew and respected Jarmusch and was watching his movies, but there's like a little bit of down by law, like shots that tell part of the story, but like aren't. To me, that's also a little bit of a step away from Leonard. There's a shot of the trunk from outside the trunk where you just see like the red taillights reflected on the ground, and we're just like watching the street from the back of the car. And that's not like part of the narrative, right? But it's like a weird, I mean, you could say it's an establishing shot to remind us like where they are, but I don't think that's really what it's doing, right? It's just like stepping out into the world for a second and giving context and choosing to zag a little bit away from just like the intimacy of the trunk. And I don't know, that is the type of stuff that I totally agree, Bilge. It feels like it's drawn from much more consciously experimental stuff that like really doesn't care about alienating the audience, or even like a Wim Wenders or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because we think of the 80s as this period where sort of artful Hollywood filmmaking is in decline. And it is. I mean, obviously the 70s are over. Everybody has snorted all the cocaine and spent all the money. And now it's just like, unless you're Steven Spielberg, you basically just have to get in line.
Well, Don Simpson found some more cocaine.
He did find some. There was a little bit of cocaine left, and he snorted what was left. But I mean, let me just say, it's not like there wasn't cocaine in the 80s. There was probably even more cocaine in the 80s.
Brave take.
Yeah. Some of it being brought in by our own government, probably.
Definitely.
But there was this sense that, like, 80s Hollywood was just like bullshit, and they were kind of betraying what had happened in the 70s. But you really do get because the indie movement is emerging, you do actually get a lot of experimentation happening. Now, a lot of the movies don't do that well, but then you get, but then it feeds into the 90s. And, like this period, I mean, this like mid to late 90s period is a period of real emergence for a lot of these filmmakers who are indie, but they are indie on a much bigger scale. I mean, your Paul Thomas Andersons, your Wes Andersons,
your Coens, your
Coens.
Yeah.
And it's funny how Soderbergh kind of gets in on, like, Soderbergh is one of those guys. He's not lumped in with those guys, but he's kind of one of those guys too,
Mm-hmm.
Or David O. Russells of the world. I mean, there's so many people like that.
Yeah, the Rebels of the Backlot, the Sharon Waxman book, in which she really puts all of her money on David O. Russell, which is really, it's an interesting to read from this perspective, where she's like, this Paul Thomas Anderson guy, he doesn't have it. Yeah. David O. Russell, that's where it is.
Speaking of Andrew Sarah's style, like calling shots on directors don't maybe, yeah.
And speaking of things that George Clooney has done that I approve of.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. The one time George Clooney was not like the go along to get along guy. It was basically headbutting his director for mistreating the crew.
Let's talk about the hotel scene.
Yeah.
Another one of the, as if the trunk scene could be topped, So they get to Detroit. Karen figures out that they're going to Detroit and follows Jack and Buddy up there. And she is staying at the Westin. This is a big thing in the novel, at the RenCen, the Renaissance Center, which is some kind of like Detroit urban development project. And Jack, there's the great scene where he waves to her from the elevator as they're escaping
awesome.
Which is the kind of thing that just makes you giggle. Like it feels like we're sort of in the line of flirtation, and you get kind of like secondhand like butterflies or whatever. So now they're in Detroit, and he calls every hotel asking if Karen Sisko is there, and finds her, and meets her up in this hotel bar where he saves her from being flirted with by these sales guys. One of whom is Joe Crest, who is
Soderbergh favorite.
Yep. And they play this little game where he introduces himself as Gary, and she says her name is Celeste, which was the name of the waitress. And they're kind of pretending that they're not who they are. And it sort of like vacillates between playing pretend and actually talking about their feelings, and like, what are we gonna, it's not a game, how are we gonna do
they drop
this?
It, which is also like, I think in a lesser film, but still a good film, they would stick with this pretense. But
and then Soderbergh does this thing that in that Q&A with him and Clooney, they're at the National Film Theatre or something in London, and the moderator mentions that Nicholas Roeg is in the audience. And so Soderbergh says, yeah, that was an actionable lift from Don't Look Now. Calls it an actionable lift, where he's intercutting them actually hooking up with them talking about what they're going to, like, before they go to her room. And it's like an interesting way to kind of diffuse the tension while also heightening it in a way. And like I don't know. I think it's great. I think it's really terrific.
This is like what formalism is supposed to do. I think it's easy and interesting to contrast this with the moment in Sex, Lies, and Videotape, where they also sit at like a table and have a kind of romantically charged conversation with each other. Where she's
playing with the glass. Yeah.
Exactly. But that's like stylistically the exact opposite, right? That's like very still. It's sort of imitating the like intense patience you have with somebody that you're falling in love with or getting interested in, right? Where you're like hyper focused. This to me is also, you said, Jake, that it's like recreating the feeling of flirtation. To me, this is Soderbergh understanding how to make an audience feel what he wants them to feel about something on screen. And it's not just by showing it directly. Because in real life, I mean, we can say that there are times, this is like what montage is about, right? He's like taking the essence of montage, which is to say sometimes to understand a moment, the best thing to show is not just the moment before that moment. It's a moment that is in relation to that moment. It's the thing that charges that moment with emotion, but maybe it happened half an hour ago at the bar, right? So to show them like in bed, the thing you have to understand the most is what they were saying to each other 30 minutes ago. And to understand like what that conversation means, you have to show where it's leading. So this is, I mean, obviously we're coming out of a season of filmmaking where we're talking about like sculpting in time, style, the exact opposite of this. But to me, this is showing like how effective it is we're getting this like moving camera on George Clooney that's again like recreating the sort of like energy of watching somebody that you're exploring or discovering feelings about. It's a mystery for the viewer. Bilge, you're talking about the viewer not needing to understand something.
Right.
The like active engagement we have to watch this scene is putting us in a position of the type of like active engagement that they are having in this conversation, right? So it's to me it is understanding like what the viewer's experience is and manipulating it effectively to charge the moment more. It's so good to me. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, and it has a really nice arc too, which is the thing that, you know, whenever I talk to people about, I used to do this thing where I would talk to filmmakers who had done really good sex scenes, like, what's the secret to it? And it has to have its own story, like it has to have its own arc. And this is it's a sex scene, but not really. But you know, because when he first shows up, at that point, it feels like she's conjured him, right? Because he shows up in the reflection in the window, right?
Yeah,
so it feels almost like because up until this point we've had another dream sequence, right? So it's like, oh, she's imagining him saving her from this situation, which again also kind of enhances this whole, well, you know, the inherent ridiculousness of the actual premise of the movie, which is that these two people would fall for each other. But you know, so he sits down, and the way they're talking at first, you're like, oh, this is a dream sequence. This isn't like really happening. Because again, they're not talking about themselves. They're talking about this sort of imaginary situation. And then, you know, when we see them in bed together, again, it's kind of like, we're still not sure how real this thing is. But at some point it becomes clear that it's like, oh, they're actually talking about stuff that actually happened. And now it feels a lot more real. And then it ends with them having this very direct, but at the same time, very sort of direct but indirect is not really a thing, but this like very strange conversation about like, why would I tell anybody that I slept with you, and why would you tell anybody that you like, what did you want, what did you expect to get out of it? And it's like, I don't know, it's like several sort of, it's like a logical argument, one of those logical arguments where you can't actually figure out what the other person is saying, because I'm like, every time I watch this movie, wait, what is he saying? I don't quite understand what he's saying, but I do feel like we're in this very, very kind of abstract realm of thought. We've gone from the sort of the physicality of the experience to this bizarre philosophical question of like what this experience even meant.
It's like back to the sex lives mode, right? It's like back to the like, exactly. Can we talk? Yeah. Is it possible to articulate what you are feeling and thinking about sex?
Right.
Yeah. And it really does feel, and that's one of the things that about this whole sequence where you're like, only Steven Soderbergh could have made this sequence like this. Like, he's the only person who could have pulled this off.
Yeah, who like he understands how to depict desire, but also has this like ambivalent relationship to it, where he
hyper intellectualized.
Yeah, exactly. And there's he does a thing in this. I think I mentioned somewhere before on the podcast that the commentary for this movie was where I learned about like color filters in cinema. Also where I learned about the Clint Eastwood film True Crime, because he mentions this actor, Isaiah Washington, very exciting young actor, is going to be in Clint Eastwood's new movie True Crime. But he contrasts the Miami sequence, which is very yellow and orange and sunny, and then the Detroit sequence, the Detroit section of the movie, which is blue and cold. But the hotel bar specifically, and then her hotel room, there are these huge windows, and it's snowing outside, but it's kind of like snow globe snow, like a little bit fakey in a way that I think is very effective. And like he's got the trans light with the twinkling cityscape behind it, and that's all very blue outside, but then inside is warm and Miami-like, and almost like they've brought that with them into this moment. And it makes the whole thing kind of like surreal and fairy tale-ish in a way that it can feel when you're like excited about a new person that you've met, and everything feels kind of like your wits have left you, and things feel kind of fake. And I think it's very effective. And then when they wake up in the morning and they have the kind of, or that's not when they wake up, but when she wakes up after they have slept together and they have this conversation, the colors are kind of muted again. And like the bloom isn't off the rose exactly, but like that warmth, that excitement feeling is has gone away, and now they're confronted with the reality of what's happened here. I think it's all good stuff. They should teach this in a class.
And all the snow that's fallen, right? So that the final act of the movie is taking place in the snow.
Exactly.
Also, you mentioned Nicholas Roeg. The other person, Soderbergh, does a commentary for Point Blank, the John Borman movie. And in the beginning of it, he's like, hey, just in case you thought I invented anything, I didn't invent anything. Anybody who's great at film. So, I mean, that's the other place where, like, the beginning of that movie, in case people haven't seen it, involves this sort of like confused, like flashback thing to the present where it's unclear. Did the main character die? Is this like a fantasy? Is it a memory? Is it a nightmare? And it's intercutting between this like very intense betrayal scene and like what follows, like sort of like benign stuff, and then also back to a memory of when he met his friend, the guy who's going to betray him. And yeah, I think that the point Soderbergh was making is like, look, people praised me for this being like a brave challenge to the audience, but obviously this film that came out 20-25 years before that was doing something way more alienating and complex and still to me very emotional, and that's why I'm going to borrow from it, which I think he does well.
Point Blank is a Donald Westlake adaptation, but it feels like it could be Leonard adjacent. It's a little little harder, it's a little less funny, but
and right around this time, we get an actual remake of Point Blank, or an adaptation. That with the
Mel Gibson one, right?
The Mel Gibson Payback, right?
Payback.
Which I think when did I talk about this? Because the thing John Borman would say about Point Blank was that he had gotten a script that was an adaptation of that novel that was, I think, very direct and very literal minded.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he threw it out the window because he totally didn't want it. And the joke I always said, well, and a very young Mel Gibson picked up that script and shot it, or Brian Helgeland, I guess. But
right.
The where was I? I was going somewhere. Oh no! So the thing that you mentioned, Ian, about Soderbergh talking about like always kind of qualifying. You think I invented this. No, I didn't. I'm just stealing it from this person and talking about, direct lifts and all that stuff. It's also so Soderbergh because, again, this goes back to that like incredibly purist attitude that he demonstrated in that quote from that interview I can't find. So it's entirely possible I made it up, where he's saying, I will never do a sequel like he's such a principled film nerd that it's like, I can't do that. Like he could have been a critic, and this is the reason why so many critics never quite manage to make movies, even the ones that want to, because I can't do that because this person already did it, or I can't no, that's like borrowing, or that's like not original. It's like at some point the really great filmmakers, they're not inventing anything. They're like, Eisenstein did this and I'm going to steal it. Right. And I mean, the platonic ideal of this is Brian De Palma, right? It's like one of my favorite filmmakers, and probably has never had an entirely original idea in his life.
Right.
But has taken all this film knowledge and all his cinephilia and all the stuff that he loved and has turned it into his own style. It's all borrowed, but it's beautiful. When it works. But like Soderbergh is still kind of, at this point still, at least, I don't know if, I assume he's not anymore, but he's still tearing himself up about this whole that's the thing I borrowed from Point Blank, and that's the thing I borrowed from Don't Look Now, but it's like it's okay, dude. Like it's okay. Like we want you to do this, And
he's like downplaying the stuff that he really succeeds at. Hearing him talk about the trunk scene, he's like, so like we ended up having to reshoot it because I did this single take thing, and I thought it turned out pretty well. That's what he says about this famous all-time scene of it developing intimacy on screen.
He's also, it's frustrating because he's very funny and like flippant on that commentary, and then our Schizopolis episode hasn't come out yet, but I talked a lot on that episode about how annoying I found that particular kind of joking that he's doing, and like, where's the commentary guy? Can the commentary guy write the jokes for Schizopolis, please?
Sure.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's a very funny guy and a very charming and smart, and you can tell, like when you hear like an interview with him or something, you're just like, this guy is like really smart, and there's certain parts of him that are almost too smart,
Right. Yeah, for his own good. Yeah. I wonder if he knew. I mean, because in the 80s and 90s, you get in academic circles a lot more discussion of postmodernism and like sort of deliberate lifting and remixing and direct
bricolage
reference
stuff,
bricolage, which, you know, hip hop sampling and Pulp Fiction, and these are classic sites of academic fixation. I wonder if, you know, his dad being an academic, if he was aware of any of that. I know his dad passes away around this time, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I wonder if there was a I hate psychoanalyzing filmmakers, but also it's fun.
Yeah.
But I'm
As
like,
a
I wonder if
pastime, I agree,
and I know. I mean, I know his dad was an academic. I don't know much about his dad, but I wonder if there was an element of him that kind of wanted to please his dad, the academic, and maybe after his dad passes, he's just like, you know what, I'm just gonna do a crime thriller.
It's possible.
I'm gonna make a bunch of Ocean's 11 movies. You know,
it's totally possible. Yeah.
But also the postmodernism. That's the other thing, is that I think a lot of people, and I remember, I mean, as someone who was like in college during this period, you know, we kind of elevated films that did that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh, this is like a really serious film because it's like referencing these other films. And then you have to catch yourself and remind yourself, like, you know what else references other movies and other things? Wayne's World.
Exactly.
Like, you know,
Right.
like everybody's doing it, you know?
Right.
Yeah. And then I would go even one step further and say Wayne's World should be exalted as a work of art.
Wayne's World is great.
Yeah.
Wayne's World was, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I loved Wayne's World, but it's so funny because you don't think of it as like, I mean, it's Penelope Spheres, who's like actually a fucking genius, but
Is Wayne's World, is it the first one or the second one where they do the whole product placement bit?
I'm going to say they probably do it. Do they not do it in the first one?
I don't know. I'll
But
rewatch. Look for that on the Patreon. We'll find a way. We'll make it. We'll make it fit. Speaking of Brian De Palma, Nancy Allen is in this movie.
Yep.
We should talk about the ending a little bit, which differs from the novel pretty significantly. Because in the
is
novel,
that Nancy Allen?
Yeah, it's Midge.
Yeah,
I don't think I realized that was Nancy Allen. Holy shit!
Yeah.
Okay.
In the novel, they get to the house. It's not a great ending, I will say. They get to the house. Ripley's not there. It's like a house sitter, like a friend's kid who's house sitting, and the maid who he is having an affair with. There's a fair amount of pretty gnarly sexual violence that is elided from the film, which I think was the right move. And then it turns out there's no money, there's no diamonds. Karen shoots Foley in the leg. That whole sequence does happen. Pretend it's not me. But then he goes back to jail, and the film ends with her. The conversation we see in the movie between her and her dad, where he says, like, maybe you could ride with him back to Florida and, see what happens on the way down. And she says, yeah, I don't know. And like, that's the end of the movie, or the end of the novel, rather. Yeah. In the movie, the diamonds are there, paying off the aquarium, the fish fixation that was set up in the prison library scene, which I think is terrific. That was wholly invented by Frank. So there is money, and Ripley is in the house. He's having an affair with his maid or something, played by Nancy Allen. And the white boy Bob accidental death, I think, is invented for the movie and is terrific. It's really funny and good. Shocking.
It's like key for like maintaining this very difficult tone, which is like Detroit. We haven't really talked about the fact. Basically, everything they do in Detroit is like sort of scary and back to the real world a little bit.
Yeah.
And yet also there's the Leonard goofiness still. So yeah, I think his accidental death, which is bloody and nasty, but also funny.
Leonard is from Detroit, we should say. His dad worked at General Motors.
Famously from Detroit.
Like an executive at General Motors. And he's another guy who like has, Leonard is sort of trying to downplay his pretty classical education for his whole career.
English and philosophy.
Yeah, and he read Ovid in Latin in school, things like this. But yeah, you're right. It gets a little scary. Soderbergh, we haven't even mentioned yet. Soderbergh invents Viola Davis, or he launches Viola Davis. She's bringing a lot to the table, but he like kind of forces the issue and puts her in a couple of movies until she takes off, which is very cool. But yeah, it's scary in Detroit, and things are coming to a head in the mansion. And Karen comes in. Jack has to kill Kenneth, the Isaiah Washington character, who is straight up scary. He's just like like you want him to leave the movie so that the tone can be fun. Like it's effective in the way that it's sort of like, hey, I don't like this guy. Like, get him out of here. Go back to the fun, flirty stuff.
Yeah, but if it's like Arcadia and death isn't real and it's like everything is fine cartoon, then you're not actually worried about what's going to happen to Jack Foley or like what it means to go back to prison.
Stakes.
Yeah.
And also I think, Isaiah Washington's character is also, I mean, we know this character from other movies where it's like this real live wire character that's introduced into the mix, and you're just sure this guy is gonna fuck everything up. He's gonna like start killing people. And I think the film handles that really well because he is very menacing, but they get him. Get him before he can do further damage,
They do.
And the White Boy Bob death is like also feels straight out of Tarantino, which of course is straight out of Leonard, but it does feel it's a very much a kind of, well, that's a thing that would have happened in Pulp Fiction,
We haven't mentioned, because we're talking about movie star Clooney. We haven't really mentioned the Coen brothers. We've been talking about Blood Simple on basically every other episode of this series, but like they don't ever do a Leonard, right? But they're very adjacent, and I think at one point they had one of these articles I'm reading. They had optioned a Leonard like everybody else, so like that's in the mix too. This sort of smart crime thriller thing is going on.
You could almost imagine Burn After Reading as like someone trying to like do a Leonard adaptation and just like failing miserably.
Yeah. I mean,
and just winding up with like a zany comedy instead. But it works.
But then I think No Country for Old Men is like the other direction, right? Like just taking the darkest parts of Leonard with just like comedy that is like
no
the
funny
blackest
idiots
possible.
And Woody Harrelson kind of wanders in from an Elmore Leonard novel. Yeah. Interesting. But any thoughts on the ending? Oh, and then of course we should say Karen shoots him in the leg, but then in the transport back down to Miami, she is in the passenger seat, and then she has apparently arranged for someone to travel with Foley, who's a character named Hejira Henry, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who is on something like his 13th prison escape. So she's maybe hooked him up with an expert, and it's a return to the fun of the earlier part of the movie, and we get a return now with lyrics of the song that plays at the beginning of the film. It's your thing, do what you want to do. Yeah. Which, I can't tell you who to sock it to. So she wants him to break out of prison and come see her, I think. Thoughts on the ending?
I love the ending. Just the way that it's first of all, the fact that it's Samuel L. Jackson who shows up, who at that point, like, everyone knows who he is. And the fact that his name is Hejira, which is such a fascinating, it's like having a guy named Exodus, I guess. I mean, it's just like, it's such a evocative name to put in that situation, especially because you're going to, this is your closing note. You're leaving on this note. So there's this like real sense of possibility. I mean, the fact that she's given him his lighter, I'm like, you're stuck in the back of a van with a guy named Hejira who's broken out 13 times, and you have a lighter. Like, what happens next? And we don't get to see that.
Right. All right.
I think one of the things I love about it is, first of all, it does what I think good Leonard adaptations do, and I'm going to include Justified, even though Justified is extremely TV in so many aspects. But it does the dance of like the moment in the mansion where he pulls down the mask and he's basically saying like, it's okay to shoot me. Like I'm giving you permission. And maybe I'm being too over the top here, but I found it like affecting. It's like, it doesn't feel like it's just perfunctory for the sake of having this desperado type. Like, I want to go out on my own terms. It really feels like for a moment, suddenly we're remembering like what's at stake here. And like we established that early shot in the prison, they use like real cons at Angola of like aging prisoners, which again, that's like the type of thing that's like a 1-second choice that brings some reality into the movie. And then we also get the Leonard dance back to the kind of fun, like you're saying, comedy relief, sort of like Aristotelian comedy of like, everything's going to turn out okay and it's fine and we can enjoy this character, Hejira. And I think Samuel L. Jackson does something that Soderbergh credits Steve Zahn for, which is like, playing a character whose role is comedic, but playing it as a human being. So like it feels grounded enough that it doesn't feel like a total cartoon, right? So like yes, we are laughing at Steve Zahn. Yes, we're laughing at the fact that he's now in the back of this whatever, like armored truck with Mr. Escape or whatever his name is. But the guy is like a guy. You still feel like this is a person, even if it is a little bit of a Leonard caricature or something. So
I'm a magician by trade. My name's Harry.
Right,
like
exactly.
that kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should say also, we got to shout out Steve Zahn's coming. He's hot off of That Thing You Do. One of the great comedic performances of all time. Yeah, there's a way that the lightening of the ending is like, you don't think of Soderbergh as optimistic, and even some of the reviews at the time kind of suggest that he has brought his darkness to. That's
Leonard. Not as crazy as it sounds.
Well, no,
to me. I mean, Leonard
I
itself is already dark. You're right.
The tone is so carefully balanced that it's not like a bummer. This movie, like he does a good job of sort of reminding you, like, this is like, people are dying, people are getting shot to death, but there's a reason to live if you're Jennifer Lopez or George Clooney, and the other one is smiling at you. Like that's a light that'll keep you going.
Well, that's also the whole thing. I mean, you guys did you guys know. I mean, you did a whole Schrader series, like the idea that there is a certain redemption and a certain purity to. Well, we're in prison, but there is love in our life, and suddenly that makes it all okay.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we should talk a little bit about prison and about sort of Leonard's kind of moral system.
I think that's great, yeah.
First of all, they shot this at Angola. It's set at Belglade, which has since closed, actually. But Belglade wouldn't let anybody film there. Soderbergh basically says, like, they didn't want the film crew giving the inmates any ideas, as if this movie was the first one to suggest you could dig out of a prison. I don't know. But Angola at the time... I mean, if you look up Angola, it's just like, it's not even really worth trying to explain how fucked up it is. Because if you Google Angola or like Louisiana State Penitentiary, it's all images, white prison guards on horseback and a bunch of black inmates, and it with like hose and picks and stuff. I mean, it is just like the.
Don't even have to say modern plantation. It's just plantation.
Because it's called Angola. Like, the name is Angola because it's on the site of the former Angola plantation.
Right.
And it's, prisoners there have to work for no pay. So they have to like work or for, pennies an hour kind of thing. The guy who ran it for 21 years, this guy named Burl Kane, who both his supporters and his detractors compare him to Boss Hogg from the Dukes of Hazzard, and like the guy looks like.
But that is also scary to imagine somebody saying, "We love this guy. He's just like Boss."
He's just like our hero, Boss Hogg. He looks terrifying, and he also was, and he's since like resigned in a cloud of scandal because he was embezzling and like having prison employees like fix up his house and stuff like that. But he was also actively encouraging film production at Angola. Which is gross, I think, because he's basically like, here's I pay me and I'll use these laborers who can't leave.
Obligatory, yeah.
So it's like you have real cons on screen, which is effective, but also like these guys aren't being compensated.
There's a documentary about Angola, I believe, right, called The Farm.
Yes.
I saw this years ago. I actually went to the Angola prison rodeo.
Very
have
famous.
The rodeo.
Yeah.
I don't know about this.
Oh yeah, no, so I don't know if it's still around. I assume it is, but
I think so. It's like spun off into its own like administrative organization now. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was it would have been 99 or 2000. I was in New Orleans for something else, and a friend of mine was in college there, and she was like, "Hey, we're all going." She was at Tulane, and she was like, "We're all going to the Angola prison rodeo. Do you want to come?" And I was like, first of all, I was like, "The what?" And I went with them, and it was like a day trip to the prison rodeo, and it was one of the most depressing things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
I mean, it was really, you just felt really sad for,
of course,
because it's all inmates, doing the stuff. And
Wikipedia has a subheading, cruelty.
There's a book about the rodeo called God of the Rodeo, which I read and I remember liking. I think it's like a kind of sociological study of it.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't realize this was shot at Angola.
Yeah. Well, so that was shot in Angola, and then the Lompoc was shot, I think, at Lompoc.
I think, yeah, or like parts of it in Palmdale at like a holding prison for immigration like violators.
Yeah,
as
not great.
Soderbergh put it. Yeah.
Lompoc, for its money, was it's been home to a number of Richard Ripley style imprisoned millionaires, and then also the guys who were who the movie The Falcon and the Snowman is about. Bilge, you were talking about the CIA smuggling in cocaine.
Yep.
Those guys, one of whom sold defense secrets to the Soviets, and the other of whom was a cocaine dealer. Those guys were locked up at Lompoc, I think, when this movie was made. That's always interesting to think about, just like
a famous criminal.
El Chapo's like around the corner from. But obviously, Angola's bad. I don't know what else to tell you. And then for Leonard's sort of moral worldview,
I think I want to invoke this, and I want to hear what you guys think, whether you think this is fair and in keeping with other Soderbergh films. At least to me, on the surface, they seem to have a lot in common in ways that I admire. I can't go an entire season without invoking Nietzsche, so I'm happy I get to get it in early here. I would say that to me, Leonard presents these characters who are, on the one hand, criticizing assumptions about like social order, things we take for granted. He says in the book, like, hacks are what they are. They're like mean and stupid or something, right? So it's certainly not taken for granted, like prison is a good place run by people trying to correct people. There's like a cynicism about how prisons come about and like who runs them and the cruelty of the people involved. So in that way, there's that type of like social critique that I think comes out of genealogy of morals type stuff, right? Of saying like these things just arrived historically. It doesn't mean that they're good. And the people who run them are often like human buffoons. But the flip side is that I think you get these heroes who are Zarathustra style exceptional. Like the reason that they can break the laws is because they're cool. And we know they're cool is because they do cool stuff. They like affirm their own exceptionalism. And I think that puts you in a weird position. And I think this is the thing that makes Leonard novels like hard to pin down if you try to extract the morality, is that you have some criminals who are very funny and great and like Han Solo style, charming. And then you also have criminals who he talks about not just as being stupid as individuals, but as like representatively stupid. He will like trade in archetypes. He'll say like, this was like your classic redneck asshole or something, right? So the people who fall into the categories, they fall into them so hard that they make the categories ontologically real. Right. And I think in that way, it gets complicated because you can't find an order to really like build anything on beyond just saying the best people in the world are like the Ocean's 11 team, basically, right? The best people in the world are the people who excel in certain areas. They make their own morality, which is sometimes kind and compassionate, sometimes self-motivated, and just like leads to these great acts or something. So I don't know. I mean, do you guys think this is Soderberghian? Well, am I just projecting?
Han Solo has an arc. Han Solo joins a revolution at some point.
That's a great point.
Yeah, there's a way that the highest, the most like rewarded, the best thing somebody can be in Leonard world is cool and above it all and like smarter than everyone else and getting one over on the system.
And that can be like a Raylan Givens cop, or that can be like a Jack
It can be a
Foley
cool cop,
criminal.
it can be a cool bank robber. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And there's like a catharsis to that, obviously, and there's a catharsis to like the Ocean's movies. And you know, it's pointed out in this film that like some bank robbers rob banks and it's sort of a compulsion and they're not hurting anybody. And like this whole movie is kind of about like under different circumstances, maybe we could have had a happy life together. Mm-hmm. And so there is that determinism here where Leonard seems to be suggesting that some people do the things that they do, whether they're good or bad, because of the circumstances in their lives. But then other people are just like white boy Bob, like they're like a big dumb oaf, like to their bones.
Exactly. And and there is no like story to explain and to sympathize.
Right. And Soderbergh says in one of these interviews that one of the things he likes about Leonard is that his characters don't change. He likes that people are just who they are the whole time, and like maybe their circumstances change, but like they don't grow, which he finds refreshing. But also like that's a very kind of Gen X, nothing matters sort of worldview that
self-congratulatory
cynicism.
I
have to try to resist that in order to like not be a curmudgeonly son of a bitch. I don't know, Bilge, what do you think?
I was actually trying to look this up because with Elmore Leonard, I mean, I did a ton of research for Elmore Leonard when I wrote about Touch, but he was brought up very religious, right?
Yeah, Catholic.
I mean, because I have this theory that people brought up, especially very Catholic. There's a part of it that like valorizes the outlaw because Jesus was like the original outlaw. Sure. But then like the outlaw who is above it all, right? And who is kind of better than anyone else that's breaking the law. I mean, like I think there is something fascinating about that because it's like, I mean, when you're very religious, you're obviously supposed to follow all these rules, but
there was one
you
guy.
worship the ultimate rule breaker, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting tension there, and I think you could build out a whole theory about like Catholic filmmakers and the types of people they make movies about.
Bad lieutenants, but things like this.
The bads lieutenants and the goods fellas, if you will, And I think there's something there. I mean, in terms of, I don't remember all the Leonard books I've read enough to be able to pin down any kind of moral vision there, but I do think that there's this. I do think that his attitude, I mean, the attitude that you outline here was so perfect for being like the pulp author of the postmodern era, so that, he can carry on the tradition of like, the hard-boileds, the Dashiell Hammetts and the Raymond Chandlers and those folks. But he's doing it in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when people are much more hyper-aware, but also aware that they're hyper-aware, and kind of everyone sees themselves as being slightly above it all, right? And I think that made him kind of an ideal author for that. And of course, which makes him perfect for the era of Tarantino. I mean, the thing we associate with Tarantino, or at least we used to associate with Tarantino, I don't know what we associate with Tarantino anymore, but like back then, this idea of like the guy who knows everything and is just like the wise ass who's really just above it all, and
who could throw it in your face, throw it back at you.
Right, and that was kind of the Tarantino persona, not just in terms of him as a filmmaker, but also the types of characters that he trafficked in. But you're right, everyone else is an idiot. Right? And what's fascinating in Tarantino is the tension between like one guy who's above it all on some level and another guy who's above it all on some level, and they collide.
Yes.
No, you're right. That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, what's weird is that like in this book and in this movie, prisons are bad and they mistreat the prisoners. But also one of Karen Sisco's like first lines on screen is her saying, I'm here for some like civil rights asshole who's complaining about macaroni and cheese, right? He's like in for life, and they're violating his civil rights because he doesn't want to eat any more mac and cheese, which again is like, what's weird is that Leonard is so unconvinced by the legitimacy of the institution of prison, but also the people who are like sincerely questioning it are also kind of like assholes, right? And in the book, there's a whole thing where Foley says like, oh, Karen Sisco, what are you, one of these feminists? Are you like getting back at men or something?
Yeah.
Like you're seeking out power because you like want to step on a guy's balls or whatever. He's like, to him, he's like, if you're part of this movement, then you're a fool. But if you're just like your own person seeking out your own version of independence, that's something special.
Idealism is frowned upon, but like individual kind of, you can't box me in sort of thing is lauded.
And this is post 80s. I mean, this is post like the feminist backlash. I mean, there's there's all this stuff happening in the 70s, and then we get the era of Reagan, and like feminism can be a punchline at this point, or are you some kind of feminist? And it's nobody's going to ask what a feminist is. They have this kind of caricaturish conception in their heads of what that would
be.
Right.
I mean, Leonard has said that the inspiration for the book came from a newspaper photo he saw of like a very strikingly beautiful woman in a skirt with a shotgun in her hand on the steps of a courthouse or something. So like the contradiction, the femininity and the masculinity butting heads within this figure are like, that's the juice that inspires the novel in the first place, and of course inspires the hit television series Karen Sisco, which we will
of course.
But which you also get, I mean, But again, it's like such a perfect example of a thing that we can look at as an inspiration for something that, give or take is you can conceive of as a work of art, right? Out of sight.
Yeah.
But then, like, this is also the era when you're getting like videos of like hot blondes in bikinis firing machine guns, which we see. We see it in Jackie Brown, but like this is a thing that existed.
I don't think he had to shoot those. I think he found those. Yeah.
And that's like the lowest of low culture, right? That is not a thing that if Elmore Leonard had said, "Oh, I was watching this VHS that a friend had of chicks in bikinis firing off machine guns, and I had the idea for how to say," you'd be like, well, this guy's an idiot.
It's not even pornography. There's something sort of more understandable about regular pornography.
Right.
Yeah. I have a bit of trivia here to present with no commentary, and I don't expect any from either of you. Burl Cain, the longtime warden of Angola, he was a Shawshank Redemption style, like, evangelical who wanted to create an exclusively Christian prison, and anyone who was a believer of the specific type of Christianity he liked was rewarded, and other people were punished. And like the ACLU sued the prison because a Mormon inmate was being denied access to the Book of Mormon. Anyway, so this Christian paragon, Burl Cain, in 2010 was among the speakers in a series at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Wow,
so that's just an interesting little bit of connection.
Just tying things together.
Do we have any final thoughts on Out of Sight?
It's crazy that there was actually someone named Burl Cain.
He's still alive, yeah.
I agree. That was my first reaction.
I was like, really? His name is Burl Cain?
Yeah.
Like, that's straight out of a novel.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, if you had to come up with a fictional prison warden, you'd name him Burl.
Yeah, it's like finding his name's like Bullwhip Jackson or something. Like, no way.
Yeah.
Final thoughts? I think Ving Rhames kind of looks like he's trying to look like a martial arts movie character with his little beanie and his little glasses. I think he's doing a good job. I like Ving Rhames. I always like Ving Rhames.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he returns to that style a little bit, I think, in late Mission Impossible stuff, which is good. His he's little great. Old man stuff. Yeah.
In terms of, this is one of the reasons why I love the fact that you guys are doing a Soderbergh series, is because he is one of these filmmakers who, I've followed his whole career, but like the work has whipsawed so much, not necessarily in terms of quality, but in terms of the types of stuff he's doing. And he's also constantly experimenting and also constantly just doing stuff that, like, he's a filmmaker I have so little conception of, other than the fact, it's Steven Soderbergh.
Right.
He's done something. I'm sure it'll be interesting, but you never, I have no idea what to expect, which makes it actually hard to sometimes, like other filmmakers who I've followed over the years, like I have some conception of who they are and what type of things they gravitate to. And as a result, I'm more into like I love reading things by them or about them, because it's like almost you have a shared set of references. And it's like, Soderbergh can do anything. And it's like so hard to just wrap your arms around his filmography,
Yeah. I was, thinking about like formal choices in this movie that don't even quite fit into what I would say are like the defining formal consistencies or patterns. There's a moment in Detroit where we're looking at Ving Rhames and George Clooney in a car. I don't know if you guys remember the shot where like you can't see them because the reflection of the tree above them like so overpowers.
Incredible shot.
Yeah.
It's an incredible shot. Yeah.
Really incredible. And to me, actually, it reminded me, we haven't really talked about Black Bag yet, for obvious reasons, but it felt more something out of that late, smooth, but also pushing you away type Soderbergh that we'll get to more. So, again, he's like laying that groundwork, but like you're saying, that is like a strong choice that for a normal director, you would say like, okay, like let me think about their style with this choice. But I don't even know that it's the style of the rest of the movie necessarily. I love that shot and I love the rest of the movie, but it's like, again, this guy who's always exploring like a new way to talk about something, and maybe it's hard to pin down like what drives him to find these things. I don't really have any other final thoughts besides saying that I think this is an all-time movie. It's so incredibly rewatchable. It's so effective, like I think we've established. It's so accessible to audiences who aren't like reading film criticism, but I think it rewards so much analysis. I think we could easily talk about the film for another hour. At least I could. So.
Yeah. Soderbergh, I think, I mentioned that this feels like the filmmaker kind of finding the material that allows him to figure out sort of at least one of his modes. But I'm thinking now, like, I'm not even sure if this is the exception or the rule, because he'll do this kind of incredibly well-crafted entertainment. You know, he'll do this, he'll do the Ocean's movies, he'll do The Informant, he'll do Magic Mike, he'll do Black Bag. But then he spends about as much time doing things that feel maybe closer to the first couple of movies of his career. You know, right after this, he does The Limey, which is not like a movie that's trying to sell popcorn.
We got Bubble coming up.
Bubble, The Good German, Che, The Girlfriend Experience. Like, he's not, and those don't feel like movies that are trying to be out of sight and failing. They're like they're doing something different. So it's interesting for him to kind of establish this. And then like Traffic, I think Aaron Brockovich is more in the out of sight vein, but is not like funny. It's not primarily comic, and Traffic is not trying to be comic at all. And so like it's interesting to find him sort of figure out like a new color to paint with. And I think of Soderbergh as like this guy, but he's also a bunch of other guys. And he talks, you know, every single interview since Sex, Lies, and Videotape, he'll talk about how people are trying to figure him out and like they can't. And I think maybe he doesn't know either. Fascinating guy. Somebody should do a podcast about him. We have one last segment here. Kimmy, will you explain this to us?
This is Popcornopolis, the segment where we ask our guest, do you like popcorn?
Well, Bilge, do you like popcorn?
Big fan of popcorn.
Oh, yeah? Any particular kinds, preferences?
I'm very much a butter popcorn guy. I mean, when I go to the movies, I can't do other snacks at the movies.
Do you put the goo on it, the popcorn, the butter goo, or do you just take how it comes out of the box in the back there?
You're saying, do you get the extra butter, the little squirt box butter?
What is the squirt box butter?
The pump. You don't pump the.
Oh, well, it's like
squirt box. I mean, he's right. That is what it is. The pump. Yeah.
What are they selling at the? Is that how they do it in Mexico?
They have chamoy down there, and it comes in and whatever.
I mean, we do have Takis popcorn in every movie
sounds
theater.
Great.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I like the butter. I like extra butter. It's like every chain has it differently. In some you have to ask for the butter, and some they have the pump. The ones near me are the two theaters near me are Cinemarks, and there you can actually ask for layered butter.
Whoa!
Which I always do, which is very nice.
I love getting the layered butter. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, why isn't everybody doing it? Why is there not? You know, honestly, that could be one Donald Trump executive order I could get behind.
Yeah. Sure.
But I do. I mean, like if I'm just sitting at home. For some reason, it's like if I'm in a movie, it has to be butter popcorn. But like, I also enjoy, you know, like cheesy popcorn and stuff. If I'm not in a movie, you know.
Popcorn, a hell of a food. That's how we all feel here on the show.
I never quite understood the concept. Like when I first came to the U.S., I mean, we must have had popcorn in Turkey, but you know, we had the equivalent of street corn, right? Grilled corn. And I never understood. I was like, wait, you grill the corn and you get grilled corn, and you boil the corn and you get like, corn. Like,
what is this?
No one knows. That's the craziest thing. No one knows how it happens.
And then you used to get the I mean, I'm sure they're still around, but like you can actually get like a corn on cob that you put in the microwave.
Dried ear of corn,
the dried ear of corn, and then I'm like,
now you
is that
really
real?
lost me.
Like what is that?
Corn is one of the most powerful foods that there is. I think I love corn.
I think that was actually a line in Interstellar, I believe.
That's right.
Sure was. I mean, Soderbergh invents Christopher Nolan too. He's the guy who puts Nolan up for the Insomnia job. Yep. This guy's crazy.
And Nolan actually gives Soderbergh a lot of credit for this, because I went to a talk by Nolan years ago, and he was talking about, because they asked him like, what was the most important movie for you? And he said actually Insomnia was, because for him, going from making indie movies to kind of a mid-budget type of film was such a big deal and was so important, because, and he actually even at the time, you know, he actually dinged some filmmakers. They didn't name them, but, you know, I'm sure he was thinking of like the Colin Trevorrows of the world, where it's like, you make an indie movie, it's like at Sundance, you made it for $500,000 or $1 million or whatever, and then suddenly you're helming a $200 million studio franchise, and you really don't have any idea what you're doing. And he felt that Soderbergh letting him have insomnia was such a big deal for him in his career.
Yeah. And now they're both big Damon guys. Damon's playing Dr. Odyssey.
That's true.
In his new movie.
Is this is when he becomes Dr. Odyssey, not when he's Mr. Odyssey?
Yeah, I don't know. He gets his degree, I think, during the film. Anyway, Bilge, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Bilge.
Thank you.
Do you have anything you would like to plug? People should go to vulture.com is my...
Yeah, they can go to vulture.com and find most of the things I've written. That's where my stuff is. That's who employs me. I do occasional, disc booklet essays and things like that, but primarily it's Vulture.
A wonderful podcast guest on other podcasts that aren't our podcast, so also worth checking out there.
You should revisit Transcendence.
Okay, thank you.
Calm down.
As for us, thank you for listening to our episode on Out of Sight. Remember to subscribe, rate us, write a review. Helps us on the algorithm. If you like the show, tell a friend, tell your dad, tell Luis Guzman. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Podcastiforme. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or you're interested in co-hosting a two-person Steven Soderbergh podcast, you can email us at podcastiforme@gmail.com. All of this is at podcastiforme.com and at shootingyourselfinthehead.com. Thank you to Jeremy Allison for our artwork. Sign up for the Patreon. We'll see you next on the main feed with The Limey. And to close things out, we didn't mention Catherine Keener, but she's always great.
She is. She really is.
Bye.
Bye.